Okay, so we're obviously going to start this completely from scratch. At the moment, I just have an empty directory called php poll. So if you're following along, you might want to create something a little bit similar. But in this video, we're going to focus just on the database, just so we can understand the relationships between the different tables. Because what we are going to be doing is storing things in different tables and then pulling all the information together using MySQL joins. So obviously the first thing to do is sort of create a database table for users. So I'm going to go ahead and create a users table here. You can obviously use anything to manage your database. I'm using SQL Pro for OS X, but you can use something like phpMyAdmin if you're used to that, or obviously do it on the command line if that's your preferred option. Either way, the structure here, we're going to have an ID and a username. This is fairly straightforward. And the username is going to be a varchar, and let's just say this is at 20 characters long. For the ID, by the way, if you are creating this with another database administration or graphical user interface, you're going to want this to be obviously an integer. You're going to want this unsigned because obviously we're not going below 0. We want a primary key on this, and more importantly, we want an auto increment. So when we start to add fields in here, you'll notice that the ID increments. Obviously, if you have some kind of authentication system, that's fine, you can use that. Otherwise, if you're just following along the video, you can just change the ID like I did in the previous video. So we now need somewhere to store actual polls. So let's create another table here. This is just going to contain the question and the start and end date. So for the structure, we have the ID, which is exactly the same as on the users table. And here we have a question, which is a text field. This is just basically going to be the question. So what do you think of the new site? Whatever, it could be anything. And then we're going to have a start and an end date. And these are just going to be date fields like so, like that. So we're going to insert some dates on here, and then we can control that to show when the poll starts and ends. And this is really useful because it means that you can schedule a poll for the future and then end it maybe after a week or 5 days or whatever you wanted to do. So that's the polls table, but obviously we need somewhere to store options. In fact, let's create some content here first of all, just so we've got some test data. So the first question I'm going to do is, what do you think of the new website? And let's go ahead and store that. And then for the starts, I'm lucky enough to be able to do now within SQL Pro, and that's going to go ahead and add my start and end date in there for me. But obviously you can just insert this manually. You might have a date picker if you're using phpMyAdmin or something like that. So the second question, let's create this now. Do you like polls? And we'll have a couple of options for this, but obviously for the start and end date, let's just do now and now. And obviously let's adjust the end date as well. Let's set this to the 10th month, and here let's set this to the 10th month. We can play around with that later when we are testing, having polls show whether they're started. Right, so the next thing to do is the choices table. So we are going to create a table called polls choices. So the way this is going to work is we're going to have a key that points back to which poll that we're referring to, or a field rather. So we're going to say poll here as a key, as a field, and we're going to have a type of int, because this is obviously going to be 1 or 2, depending on which poll we're referring to. So for the structure here, we're going to have ID, poll, and the name. This is the name of the choice. This could, of course, be text, but probably best as a varchar, sort of a 255 length varchar. It really depends. In fact, let's do that now because there's no real need for it to be a text field. Okay, so we've got an ID, a poll, and a name. That's all we need. This poll integer could be shortened a little bit because it's unlikely that you can have a length of 11. Same with this ID, to be honest, and same with the others, but we'll just leave them as default for now. So poll choices, let's add 3 choices for this poll and 3 choices for this poll. So we're inserting them for ID of 1 and for ID of 2. So for the poll here, we're going to say 1. And the name, well, what would the first option be? We're talking about whether we like the website or not. So we're going to say, I love it. I'm going to create another one under poll ID of 1, sorry. It's all right. And then we'll have another one, poll ID of 1. I hate it. So we've got a sort of like, middle, and love. A love, middle, and hate. And let's go ahead and create 3 options for poll 2. And this is the question, do you like polls? So in this case, I'm going to say, I love polls. And for poll 2, we're going to say, they're okay when I'm in the mood. And then for 2, let's say, I can't stand them. So we've now got 3 choices for poll 1 and 3 choices for poll 2. You can obviously add more if you want or less. You can have unlimited amount of options here, really. So we now need somewhere to store which user has chosen which option. So let's create another database table here, and we're going to call this polls answers. So this is obviously going to have an ID field. We're going to have a user because we need to identify which user has chosen which option. In this case, we're going to refer to a specific poll because we want to say which poll that they've added their answer for. And we're also then going to refer to the choice. So this is going to be the ID of the choice here. So it could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So basically, we've got a poll with many answers, many choices here. And then we've got a user can make many answers, I guess, but one per poll, which we'll be controlling later. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, for the answers, that refers again back to the poll. An answer can have one poll, an answer can have one user, and an answer can have one choice per user. So let's actually mock. In fact, no, we won't mock this. We'll wait till we actually go ahead and fill in the data for this. We'll do that via a form on the website. But you should have a good idea now of how this all fits together. And it's important to do things like this because we do want to design things separately so they're a little bit more scalable. So for example, you might want to see which polls a user has completed. Well, that's easy. Under under answers, you know that you can see which poll a user has chosen by grabbing all of these records by where the user is 1 perhaps, and then you can see which poll they've chosen, and you can even see their choice. So this might not be the best database design, but it's certainly for a very small little application like this will do us just fine. So let's go ahead and in the next part, we're going to actually start to work on the code, start to output the polls, output the choices, and then allow users to make answers.